Thank you so much, Yasin, for having me. I think this is the first ZK day that I've been able to attend, so I'm super excited to be here. Even though it is a little early in my time zone, it's forced me to adjust my sleep schedule to wake up a little bit early. But yeah, like Yasin mentioned, my name is Brian. I am the creator of the Dark Forest game, and I also help out with ecosystem development and applied ZK R&D with a number of different organizations in the Ethereum ecosystem. And today I'm going to be talking about 6 ZK moonshots, or why we need ZK for the application layer of systems like Ethereum. Cool. So I want to give a quick overview of one framing of where most of the development activity on the application level of decentralized platforms is right now. So my claim is that over the last couple of years, most of the recent work in things like anything from decentralized finance to decentralized governance, etc., has focused on iterating on or permuting existing mechanics. So what does this mean? Well, for those who were at EthCC or who saw this talk online, Vitalik gave a talk earlier this summer about how, at the moment, Ethereum's main production application is finance, and a lot of the activity that's been going on in decentralized finance has become very derivative. So, as he sort of said tongue-in-cheek, a lot of recent applications reduced down to something that's like giving people tokens and letting people earn yield on their tokens and tokenizing the yield and earning yield on the yield tokens. So, building up these layers on top of layers on top of layers that after some point you start to sort of wonder, like, what is the point? So, this is one example, I think, one particularly, relatively less inspiring example of people taking, primitives that already exist. Like we have a lot of these financial primitives and money Legos, DeFi Legos at the application level right now, and just kind of recombining them to see what we get. I think another example of a project that has captured a lot of attention recently is Loot, which for those of you who haven't heard of this, it's a very cool NFT project that is very, very community driven. Essentially, the creator of Loot sort of just released, I think it was like 8,000 of these quote unquote loot bags out into the world as NFTs. And basically he, gave up control of the project from there, left it up to the people who minted these loot bags, these bags of NFTs, to determine what to actually do with the project. And this spawned, there were a bunch of people who came together to build either like derivative projects or artwork on top of this project, or, different applications that are integrated to now be able to use Loot. So really, really community driven, and a pretty novel like distribution / ownership mechanism, which I think is very cool as far as like enabling a different kind of community to emerge from compared with what a lot of the other like either NFT or art projects, which have some like, central authority like maintaining the project, look like. Here's one quote from Twitter: "Loot is NFT improv. It is an invitation to respond with yes and." Yeah, so this is really cool. But I think that fundamentally at the technical level, it's not doing too much novel stuff. There's, it's not like the tech is doing some super heavy lifting. It's more that people have found a way to use existing blockchain primitives to experiment with like distribution and ownership and community. And lastly, like there's been a lot of work done the last couple of years on wallet and dApp UX. So for example, we've got smart contract wallets like Argent, or wallets like Rainbow. We've got, new patterns like the XDAI burner wallet that Austin Griffith has showcased the last few years and that we integrated into Dark Forest. And folks have we can sort of see over time that the UX of actually interacting with crypto as an end user has steadily improved, and folks are really into these wallets like Rainbow and Argent and all these new sorts of experiments. So I think that all of these are examples of things that really they help a lot with things like mainstream adoption and accessibility by experimenting with new use cases and stuff like that. But none of these sorts of development directions really move the needle on what is fundamentally possible on decentralized platforms. So we're using like existing technology, smart contract technology, writing contracts with Solidity or whatever, to experiment with new project ownership models or improvements on UX or experiments into like incentivization mechanisms. But if you winded back the clock 2 or 3 years ago, you wouldn't necessarily be surprised that this stuff is at least like technically possible. And the question that we're very interested in is how can we actually move the needle on what is possible to do with decentralized platforms? And I claim that in order to do this, we actually need new technology. We can't just recombine our existing tools in different ways by permuting these different Lego blocks that we have available to us, or by iterating on and making something that already exists better. We actually, we need new technology to do stuff that wasn't possible before. For example, ZK snarks are new technology, which is the subject of this talk. So basically, I'm going to go over 6 kind of like moonshot ZK application ideas, where we basically will talk about like, here are 6 things that would not necessarily be possible without ZK on a blockchain. But these are sort of like exciting high-level visions that we think could be constructed with the help of ZK snarks, and which in most cases we actually have some sort of proof of concept, either implementations for, explorations into. So to ease us in, the first high-level vision / moonshot is this idea of EVE Online on the blockchain. So for those who aren't familiar, EVE Online is a massively multiplayer online strategy game where players basically like they collect resources, join player organizations, engage in warfare and diplomacy, and it's got a lot of the elements of a very rich and persistent universe. And the vision here is if you could put something with that level of complexity on a blockchain, then you'd have an infinitely hackable and fully decentralized MMO strategy game, where players would be able to automate and script actions and meta actions, write mods, write third-party clients, build marketplaces and corporations or DAOs, and all of this would be happening in a game universe where the assets have real-world value. The ZK mechanic here is that lots of MMO games, in fact, I think pretty much all MMO games have some component, especially strategy games, have some component of like incomplete information. So StarCraft has a fog of war, which means that you might not know where your enemy's base is until you send a unit over and scout the map, or things like your inventory might be private, or the spells that you have might be private, or something like that. In particular, I think that the really key thing that we first started experimenting with Dark Forest was using ZK snarks to hide your location on a map. So now you have like a cryptographic fog of war. And without incomplete information mechanics, these strategy games sort of feel very simple or not as rich, which is why ZK is very important for these sorts of games. But yeah, like we, this quote unquote moonshot is something that has gradually been realized over the last 2 years in the form of Dark Forest. There's a new game that we're incubating called ZK Dungeon. But all in all, like this is something which would not have been possible without ZK snarks, and I think has leveled up what is possible in gaming thanks to zero-knowledge cryptography. And if you haven't heard of Dark Forest, you can check us out on Twitter at darkforest_ETH, or you can head over to zkga.me, which is the website you can play the game on. You'll need an invite key, so ask Yasin or myself. Okay, so the second moonshot is the idea of a private data marketplace. So what this is it's an on-chain or fully decentralized data marketplace where users can transact like secret or encrypted data, for example, a private key or a set or a location in the Dark Forest universe, or a data set with certain aggregate statistics, or a high-res image that downsamples to a known low-res image. Any sorts of secret data can be exchanged between a buyer and a seller on-chain without revealing to the rest of the world, So what is needed in order to build such a thing is you need ZK snarks to allow you to build these like private data escrow smart contracts. If I am selling you data, then I'm basically sending you something like encrypted or some secret hash commitment or something on chain to you that you're later going to take and like decrypt or whatever else. You need to have confidence, and the smart contract needs to be able to verify that that data is indeed, like the decryption of that data is indeed the thing that you care about. It has certain mathematical properties. It reflects, a key that can be used to unlock something, or it's a data set with some statistics. So that's where the ZK proofs come in. ZK proofs allow you to say, I'm not going to reveal the decryption of this data, but I can prove that the data has these properties. So, some examples of things that this could be useful for are, one, you could sell private content that has public previews. Right now, there's kind of an issue in like, how do you implement something like a paywall, like a true paywall between a buyer and a seller online? This is, the tricky thing that happens if you aren't able to do this is that you have like sort of the free rider problem around funding content, where so long as like if person A is willing to pay for content but B is not, and the content gets released, then like B gets all the benefits, even though they didn't shoulder any of the costs. But with this construction, you could sell private content that you send out previews of into the world, like a sample of an article or like a low-res preview of some artwork, etc. You could transact secret data sets. So, for example, like let's say you have a data set of, let's say some like medical data or something like that, and you want to prove that this data set has certain properties and transact that, or you declare that it has some certain properties and you transact that. And you could also allow and incentivize whistleblowers to sell secrets. So for example, I could put a bounty on like a Dark Forest planet location, and if someone has the coordinates to that planet, then they could sell it to me via this private data escrow smart contract. The third ZK moonshot is decentralized Minecraft. More specifically, we'd like to be able to build fully crypto native and procedurally generated virtual worlds. So if folks have seen Minecraft before, it looks like this sort of top image over here, where you have these like very rich landscapes and biomes. So you'll have forests, and then there's beaches and oceans and mountains and all these sorts of things. These worlds are generated with mathematical algorithms called procedural generation algorithms. And these algorithms are too expensive to run in the EVM itself. However, ZK proof verification is always constant time. And Perlin noise, which is one of the most fundamental procedural generation algorithms, can be implemented inside of a ZK snark. So Perlin noise, a very basic like two-dimensional Perlin noise function, much less complicated than the one used in Minecraft, and produce images like this thing in the lower left corner, lower right corner. And what we can do is we can take Perlin noise, we can implement the more complex iterations of it, put it inside a ZK snark, and have the verifier on chain. And what that essentially does is it allows you to build this whole decentralized and very rich universe. So yeah, this is something that is actually built into Dark Forest, a very simple version of it at least. And in the new game, ZK Dungeon, Perlin noise is also used to determine the spawn locations of different resources. But yeah, this kind of slew of techniques would allow us to build all sorts of different games that aren't currently possible, rather than something like, imagine like Decentraland or Crypto Voxels or any game where you like sort of initialize onto a blank canvas, and that's not very interesting. You have like 100 by 100 like blank white grid, and like players can come in and fill in the grid. Rather, you can start off these universes with real features and real sorts of, you know, like actual stuff to do. So games like Stardew Valley or Animal Crossing or Minecraft or other sort of games that involve rich worlds become possible on chain. The fourth moonshot is ZK machine learning. So this one's very buzzwordy, but the high level question is, can we put a neural network on a blockchain? Can we have on-chain execution of regression or neural networks or other algorithms, optionally with strong privacy guarantees? And the answer is, we think, is like possibly yes. And the way that you can do that is by putting these algorithms inside snarks and putting the snark verifier on chain. So for example, you could put linear regression inside of a ZK snark and then put that on chain. And then that's essentially like anybody can do the off-chain computation for like running some data through the running some inputs through the linear regression. And they can upload the proof to the chain, and essentially you like now have an oracle for some sort of like, decision problem that an ML algorithm has been trained to solve. So yeah, there's a proof of concept implementation of this by one of the ETH University students, Peiyuan Liao, who has put linear regression into a circuit. And this is exciting for a number of reasons. One is that, again, we have this oracle thing. So you could classify data or account activity on chain, like that's a primitive that you could call into. And it's trustless as well. You don't need to rely on like some third party or some bridge or something. You just need someone to run the computation and then like upload the ZK proof. In the future, and like this is something that even has to do with like beyond blockchains, but you could have systems where like a lot of times I think in the world we trade off personalization for custody of our data. So I like personalized ads, but I don't like the fact that Google and Facebook own my data. You could imagine like ad auction mechanisms that rely on ZK snarks, where you're ZK proving that like the output of some machine learning algorithm on my secret data is like X or Y or Z, relevance score, and like that's used to auction for like my time on an ad network, on like a distributed global ad network. And this is also closely related to like this synergizes with the private data marketplace idea, which basically in conjunction would allow you to sell secret data sets or models while proving that this is a model that achieves a certain performance on a publicly known data set, or this is a data set that is indeed like, this is some data that is, like this machine learning model that is publicly known demonstrates that this data is interesting or relevant or, has a certain proportion of something or other. Moonshot number 5 is private asset / inventory commitments. This is a little vague, so I'll just mention the specific mechanic. A specific thing that we are interested in building is a fully decentralized trading card game. So card games like Hearthstone have inspired a lot of projects, a lot of like crypto gaming projects, like for example, Skyweaver or Gods Unchained. But these are not truly crypto games. They're more just like the assets and ownership of cards is recorded on chain, and then all the gameplay happens off chain. And one of the reasons for this is because card games are really hard to implement in a decentralized environment. So if folks have heard of mental poker before, it's really hard to play like poker in a decentralized way. And specifically, like one thing that's really hard is being able to draw cards privately but randomly from a deck. randomly is hard because there's all the problems of generating randomness in a decentralized environment that is, unbiasable. And privately, doubly hard because if you're drawing stuff privately, then how do you actually check that this stuff is, you've done all your drawing and stuff according to the rules, and you haven't cheated and swapped out one of your cards or something like that. There's like schemes like commit reveal that sort of that will help with this, but those are ultimately like unwieldy and pretty limited for several reasons, which we won't go into here. But one thing that's very interesting is that ZK snarks can be used to very cleanly implement a number of the relevant primitives here, like privately drawing a card, adding it to a hand, playing a card, or even like crafting cards within a hand. So we have 3 sort of experiments into this sort of thing. So we definitely know that it's possible. So the Dark Forest team built a sort of proof of concept demo game last November called Boat Fight, which had this like card drawing element. And then 2 teams from ETH University built card games that were based around ZK snarks as well, just to kind of show off the card primitives. And yeah, like I mentioned, this would enable us to build like a fully on-chain trading card game. But also beyond that, I think this is actually quite a general construction. So there's a question, mental poker is auditable after game ends. Yeah, so I can speak to a little bit of the limitations of systems like commit reveal. So one is that you have to do this audit at the very end of the game, and like the length of the audit scales with the length of the game. So if Dark Forest was implemented, why can't commit reveal be used for Dark Forest? Well, Dark Forest has like players are making like hundreds of thousands, if not like millions of moves in total, and this is not something that is feasible. The other thing is that like commit reveal is predicated on games being eventually complete information, on it being possible for the game having an end and for everyone being okay with things being revealed at the very end of the game. But this is not always true. So for example, in a persistent game like Dark Forest, there's no end point where you can reveal everything. And furthermore, even in games that do have a definite end, it's not always the case that people would want to reveal their secret moves midway through, because that might reveal their strategy. It is the case for poker that everything can be revealed at the showdown, or if you choose, you can choose to fold instead of reveal. But this is, still limiting for like the total class of card games that could exist. But yeah, I think we think this is a pretty general construction actually, and it can be used for any game where there's or any environment where there's the concept of a private inventory. So in an MMORPG, this might be your inventory or your bank account. There's kind of a basic expectation of privacy in these virtual worlds that you can't just like look at anyone else's bank account. And along with the private data marketplace stuff, you could have people exchange private. You could have people like trade or exchange items privately, sort of inside of a single smart contract, while maintaining the privacy of their inventories. And the last construction that we have is the idea of a ZK message board, where you have a fully decentralized message board that gives mainstream users privacy and power over their data, while allowing users to signal credibility, like that they have a certain reputation score, that they're a member of a certain group. And there's a number of different projects that have sort of proven out some early concepts here. One is the Semaphore team that's supported by Ethereum Foundation's applied ZK teams. And also there's another ETH University team that was working on a simple sort of polling / voting / posting app. But yeah, this one's exciting because you can have anonymous whistleblowers who signal the credibility of claims without putting their identity at risk, but they can sign using ZK proofs saying like, I am a member, I'm like a US senator or something like that. You'd have these message boards where people prove that they have been on the message board for some period of time, or that they've accumulated some amount of karma without revealing their posting history. And you can have things like voters signaling support for a proposal in an environment where they might not feel comfortable doing so publicly. But if enough people feel a certain way in private and signal this to each other, then people can get together, and this maybe can help out with some of the negative externalities in politics that cause stuff like polarization, where if your votes are public, then you feel like you have to vote the party line, even if like half of your party would vote against the party line if they could only coordinate and get together and realize this. So yeah, in summary, I think that the next step function in Ethereum apps won't come from doing existing stuff better. It'll come from being able to do things that weren't possible before. These 6 ideas are things that would seem like moonshots or impossible today with the existing technology that people have used to build like Loot or DeFi apps or better wallets. But they are possible with ZK Crypto, and we think that ZK Crypto will play a vital role at the level of applications and not just protocols. If you're interested in helping out with any of these projects or getting involved with the ecosystem that we are building, then feel free to reach out. We'd love to chat. My email, you can find me at brian@zeroxpark.org. ZeroXPark is a new research organization / foundation that we are setting up to help support the development of applications like these, including Dark Forest and ZK Dungeon and ETH University. It is basically going to help support things with grants, community initiatives, supporting like public infrastructure, stuff like that, funded by donations and grants itself. So also if you are a part of or a representative of an organization that's looking to support research work, then we'd love to get in touch as we're currently raising a round of grants. But yeah, that's pretty much it for my talk. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for sharing. Is a new organization recently founded, the ZeroXPark?
Yeah, so this is very recent, like as of the last, we're still actually going through the incorporation process right now, and we got our first funding commitments in the last few weeks, but this actually isn't publicly announced yet. It will probably be publicly announced in the next few weeks. So I guess you get a preview here.
That is pretty cool. Any questions for Brian?
Sorry if the question is a little bit distinct, but for I bet everyone here has already heard about the SC Fantasy, and it's a completely different thing from Dark Forest. I know, but for the Moonshot applications to be successful, we must have one very interesting, not to us geeks, but to general people, that people will start to embrace them in maybe mid to large scale. And regarding Dark Forest, it's very much, although I haven't played it myself yet, but it really seems like a newer, more exciting version of our old browser-based games. And what are your plans, your team, to integrate something more exciting? It's more for the, personally, I think it's exciting, but for the normal people that they'll start joining it and maybe to make it a trend. But I don't know if that in line with your vision, because it's kind of, this idea kind of stinks if we want to keep it pure. What's your thought about it?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think that, like you said, Dark Forest is pretty interesting, I think, for geeks, as well as ZK Dungeon to some extent as well. This is one of the reasons I'm really excited about this third Moonshot, which is the procedural generation algorithms inside ZK Snarks, because games like, Stardew Valley or Animal Crossing or Minecraft are much more inclusive, and I think can have much more mainstream appeal. But right now, the sort of mechanics that are possible to implement, or that we have implemented with, and I think are easiest to implement with ZK Snarks, are very pure ones. So they're like strategy mechanics, like the Fog of War, or hiding like your cards in a card game. But I think that the end goal should be to build for actual users. And I would like to see a game built off of the Perlin noise construction that is something that's friendlier and more accessible to like a mainstream audience. And that's something that will have to happen in conjunction with improvements to UX and new application design patterns.
I mean, those 5 ideas, they are very much. I mean, people who knows about ZK, they will think that like, yeah, those are ZK native and not something too just fancy words for the investor to put more money in. But in a sense, probably, I mean, those your average gamers, they don't want something that is necessarily 100% ZK words. They may just want to have something that they can be bragging about, like NFTs. So it's not like I agree with this kind of mindset, but as a participant in the ecosystem myself, sometimes I would say this kind of mindset, I mean, more deviate to the evil side, non-politically correct side, will actually be beneficial to the promotion of all of the ZK applications. But maybe it's only me. But yeah, sorry, I don't have a concrete answer for that. I mean, for how to promote the games.
Oh, I see what you mean. Or I think I do, and correct me if I'm wrong. I guess, yeah, so there's one question that's important to answer, which is why build games in a pure and decentralized way? I think this is a little bit of a longer conversation, but the big thing to me is that you get interoperability. So what can happen if your entire game is on-chain, and I have another project or another presentation from EdCon where we talk about this. But the basic idea is that if you have interoperability, then players can start building on top of the game. They can build in new features. So someone can write a smart contract that's like, a player corporation or a marketplace, or they add a new resource to the game, or they build a game inside the game. And you're able to leverage the players' creativity thanks to the fact that the game is fully on-chain. Whereas like in games where the gameplay is not completely on-chain, players cannot, the community is not able to provide as much or to build as much on top. The other thing is that decentralized games can interact with each other. So yeah, exactly, like some sort of gaming Legos. But yeah, so you could have like one decentralized game can permissionlessly just grandfather in the accounts or reputations of another one, or the leveling system or anything like that. I like maybe the simplest example is that items can be easily accepted by like a new game that someone builds can easily accept items from a previous game where they're like, maybe ZK Dungeon says, if you deposit your Dark Forest Pyramid artifact into your ZK Dungeon heart, then all your units power up. And that makes the Dark Forest artifact much more real. It becomes something that you can like pick up and carry around with you around the metaverse. Or things like, imagine if you could take your sword from World of Warcraft and bring it with you into RuneScape. Then that sword becomes like a more like real object. So the end goal definitely is to actually build out new experiences. It's not purely experimentation. And I think this is what's made Dark Forest relatively successful in the community, is that there's a rich, a huge part of the gameplay experience is using other players' mods or interacting with other players' smart contracts via marketplaces or other things. So
that's precisely what you meant in this slide, that we need some infrastructure, some Legos that we can build upon. And in the future, like there's an example that I can raise. There's an app called Roblox, and kids inside, they build games, they sell games, but in a sense, they are being exploited by it's a billion market for the uninformed, but there are some, in a sense, they are exploited, abused by the company, which is which is very centralized. And yeah, by doing this and the metaverse thing and the example, I mean the equipment transfer you've just mentioned, that sounds really like a killer future that we're going to build on both. So yeah, thanks for sharing. That's very insightful.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Actually, I have a follow-up question for that. You kind of hinted to that actually with mentioning other popular games, and I wonder if it would be possible to have some sort of interconnection of like conventional games and like build some blockchain-based interface on top of that. So, for example, EVE Online allows you to call a lot of stuff from the game through an API, and then like you could like basically take that and like write some stuff to a blockchain that could extend the game. Do you know of any of those of some project like that, or what you mentioned with Minecraft, World of Warcraft? I don't know.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that comes to mind, and correct me if this isn't what an example of what you were thinking of, is just games that allow assets to be, or asset ownership to be recorded on chain. So this is sort of like the those trading card games, Gods Unchained or Skyweaver. I think that personally for us, we are less interested in these applications because they don't allow as much extensibility as compared to like crypto native games, which is what we think is most exciting. I think that the more of the game is on chain, the more the community is able to build on top of it. And if all of the game is on chain, then that unlocks something special where the community feels like they are completely empowered to own the game and build on top of it, rather than being, there being like any particular entity that dictates a part of the gameplay experience.
Yeah, usually the publisher wants to retain some sort of centralized control for many reasons. And yeah, I think this approach would just help for like better mass adoption, because like you can take popular games and like see if this crypto add-on would catch on, right? Let's see. I think we'll see definitely more experiments in all directions.
I mean, we definitely welcome experiments into starting from something that looks more traditional or centralized, and then moving towards or adding on top decentralized mechanisms. I think that like games don't need to be completely on chain to be successful commercially or artistically in the crypto world. But in terms of the experimentation direction that we think is most underserved, I think that there's actually a fair number of teams that are working on taking like normal games and adding crypto on top, but there's very few teams that are working on building from the blockchain from day one for their games, and that's something that I think we're the most excited about as a result.
Yeah, I do definitely love blockchain games, but so far it always felt a little more experiments for geeks and not very ready for like being a blockbuster game.
Yeah,
That's always been my worry, but I definitely follow that developments. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for participating today. Special thanks goes to Kevin Jia Maishen, who curated the entire program.